Welcome to Vacuum Sealing 101. I am Bagman. I have been vacuum sealing since about 2007, 8-ish. So 16, 17 years, depending how far back my memory goes. I started with non-Cuban cigars. I find Cuban cigars obviously age better. Non-Cubans, when you receive them ready to smoke, a little asterisk for 2023 Cubans, which I'll get into later. I found that they needed to be sealed sooner than Cubans because Cubans would need to age to get better. Non-Cubans pretty much they're ready to go. So I wanted to see how long I can preserve that taste into the future. I didn't really get into vacuum sealing Cubans until about 2014, 2015. Then I really started to ramp it up. I went to Cuba many times when we could between 2017 and early 2020. I brought back enormous amounts of cigars on those trips. It was always fun to bring them back and just declare them. We have a 4% tax on anything over $800, which is incredible considering every country tax you like crazy if you bring back more than 2 boxes. They never collected it. Sometimes they shook their head, and sometimes I brought friends to spread out the love. But in the end, what happened was I had just an absolute massive collection. And realizing that, doing the math, that I was going to be having cigars for the next 20 or 30 years easily. So at around 400 boxes, I, in earnest, started to vacuum sealing my boxes. Now, I already knew the principles of what I needed to do via the non-Cubans, but how they age in a bag was something I had to learn over time. Now, through these videos that I have, and I've done, most of them already. I'm actually doing the intro and the conclusion back to back right now. Um, what I have found in regard to the aging process, what we've seen at the very, very last video, actually this very first one I did on the 4th of July, and then every other video has been done afterwards, going completely backwards. But you'll see how when I smoked a 9-year-old Hoyo de Monterrey Double Corona from 2015 from a cab that I had, and just my flavor notes of the taste. I'll go through all the steps you need to do, all the arguments that I hear. There's so much misinformation out there. And I'll go through most of them right here. In the end, all that really matters is, does it work? And the answer is yes. You can vacuum seal cigars. They will last for a very long time. How long, still to be determined, but I'm usually looking at 20 years with my non-Cubans. So it's likely, with Cubans that they're going to go even longer. Now, by the time I figure that out, it'll be too late to come with a strategy of buying cigars aged because I'll be way too old at that point. So hopefully the next generation will learn from this stuff. But I want to go over some of the weirdest things that I've heard because I spend a enormous amount of time when I'm talking about vacuum sealing of hearing people telling me that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm wrong, it doesn't work, and some of the stuff I hear is just absolutely crazy. And every single time it's by someone who has never done it or who's done it wrong. Anyone who's done it correctly knows that it works. So pretty much when I know when I'm talking to someone online that's against it, that they've never tried it. So anyways, let me go through some of the stuff that I hear and address them. One, you may be overestimating the vacuum that a food saver is producing. No, and I'll go through that as I go through the steps. I am not. It is nowhere near a full vacuum. That one's a little harder to answer. For practical purposes, it is a full vacuum. Is it a full vacuum? No. Some stuff will still get through, and I did some tests, and you'll see the result of that. The bags are quite permeable to gas. That's just no. Anyone can look up at bags and what they're made of, and I'm going to get into what bags are made of and what you need in regards to your knowledge of what blocks out, because you have vapor and you also have oxygen. But someone who actually knows quite a bit, I hear this from this individual. He says, in my opinion, it had nothing to do with the vacuum, which I actually try to minimize. So an argument I have with someone online who's very adamant and does this and succeeds in this is what's important. Do you seal the box completely? Do you leave a little bit of air? And is there a difference? Now, I ran tests to show that it actually does make a little bit of a difference. In the big scheme, is it going to make a big enough difference to change? Probably not. But you might as well go with what works best. Why chance it? Um, some of the weirder stuff that I've heard, and it all kind of goes together. And I could not figure this out. So for the longest time, it was the same argument. Cigars will dry out, that kind of stuff. But I hear oils being sucked out of a cigar. Um, I couldn't even figure out where that came from. Then I realized when I was doing a little bit of research on this, Chat GPT, which I very much dislike for many reasons, one being that we're going to feel that's going to be replaced with Chat GPT, so I guess it's kind of a competition. But somebody sent this to me, and it's simply, I asked GPT, is vacuum sealing a good idea for long-term storage of cigars? And this is the response that ChatGPT gave. Vacuum sealing is generally not recommended for long-term storage of cigars. Cigars need to be stored in an environment that maintains proper humidity levels, typically around 65 to 72% relative humidity, to preserve their flavor quality. Vacuum sealing removes air and consequently moisture from the seal package, which can then dry out the cigars and negatively affect the taste and burn quality. Uh, it's hard to really respond to that. It's so absolutely ridiculous and nothing's in there. So I don't know where ChatGPT gets this information, but I'm here to tell you that that's not. But when I saw that answer and I see the stuff online, dried out cigars, oils being sucked out. I mean, if you actually see the process, the vacuum seal is a very quick process. Oil is not going anywhere. Um, and it's not pulling out the humidity, it's creating a vacuum. So, anyways, for the new generation of people who are arguing, I guess I'm arguing now with ChatGPT along with people who haven't tried it. But if you ever did Google that and wonder, I will address that. Um, some of the difference in materials, I'll go in what kind of bags we use, and like a typical one would be a Ziploc, or a vacuum seal. Now the difference between that, we're going to get into all this, but PE versus PA, and this is the type of plastic that's being used. PA is also referred to nylon. I'll from this point on refer to it as nylon instead of PA. But Ziploc bags are made almost entirely of PE, which makes them waterproof. So think of putting a sandwich in a bag in a freezer, a cooler to work, what have you, that the ice melt doesn't get into. So the point of it is to keep out water. Whereas PA, the introduction of PA, will actually block the oxygen. I'll get into a little bit more of that here shortly. But when you're looking at bags, the vacuum bags versus like a Ziploc bag, there's a difference between that two material. And the difference is what makes vacuum sealing possible in cigars. Now, in researching vacuum seals, nobody assumes, rightfully pretty much, that you're asking about cigars. They're thinking you're talking about food, right? So whenever you ask questions or when you're Googling stuff, you're going to get misinformation because they don't really realize that what you're trying to do here. So researching can be kind of tough. And even when I email manufacturers, I end up emailing four, and I'll go through their responses shortly. I had to explain to them what I was doing a little better so that they could actually answer the question back better. So it was, interesting doing this research. I've done a lot of research because I've always gone on the assumption that, hey, not the assumption, the reality that it just works. So that was the argument. But then when I get online, people start throwing technical stuff, and this stuff is very technical. When I was researching most of these articles about how does PA versus PE block, you read these articles, it's extremely complex. So I found that actually was wrong a couple times of that stuff I did actually quite fully understand. And one was the PE and the PA portion of the bags and how the total action of the mixture of the material used makes a huge difference. We'll go over when should you vacuum. You know, automatically just get a box from the store, mail, what have you, and then go ahead and vacuum up. There's time with that. Do cigars age in a seal? That was an interesting topic. Now I go through what I've experienced, but I've emailed some people like Eddie Sarkisian from Davidoff. When I emailed him about his thought on the subject, said they don't age. And of course, in my research, for actual usage, that's not true. So it's funny, even some of the most experts might not have full information on this. So it's a really misunderstood subject. Um, and let's face it, there's only a handful of us who are willing to vacuum seal and have large collections. So it's not like there's a large community for us. So hence the void, trying to fill out some information for everybody. Um, as a side note, when I on forums I mentioned about my research, I have a test going. It's been going on for 5 years. I'm going for 5 more years. I asked a question on a forum years ago, and I said, "Can you freeze cigars?" Now, of course, if you ever Google it, you get the Beatles reply: 3 days in a freezer, 1 day in a fridge, and out you go. What I'm talking about is putting them in a freezer and leaving them in there. Now, everyone says that's not going to work. Of course, I asked anyone, have you ever tried it? And the answer is no. So I actually vacuum sealed some cigars in multiple bags. Some of them went into the freezer. Some of them are just vacuum sealed inside my humidor, and some of them are actually just loose, kind of bunched together in a box. And I'm going to kind of compare it. Who knows? The freezer study may be a complete failure on my part. And, no harm, no foul. They were cigars I weren't loving. They were okay cigars. Um, but we'll see what comes with that. So in 5 more years, I'll have that answer. Probably could do it sooner than that because at this point, the freezer after 5 years, but we shall see. I have gone to the freezer a few times to see them, and they do seem fine. They're not cracking apart or any issue. But I guess in my head, if they can survive 3 days, why can't they survive longer? But other people might have answers, tell me that's stupid and it's going to fail. But regardless, I want to try myself. Um, I'm going to go into a little bit into Min Ron Nee. Now, for those who don't know, he's kind of was an expert. He actually passed away this year in the cigar world, wrote a very comprehensive book or Bible. Some people refer to it as far as cigars. He was very opinionated about the role of oxygen in not vacuum sealing, but the role oxygen plays in aging. And he was a big proponent of limiting oxygen for aging, which obviously is being done extreme when you do it from vacuum seal. But I'll get into a few of his quotes that he has. Um, can you leave your vacuum box out of a humidor? Well, I'll get into that. Short answer is I do not recommend it. But as I said, when I do the wrap up video, which I said I'm doing right after I end this video, I'll go into why I do not recommend that. Mold. So some of my initial concerns, which actually never come up, no one's ever brought up these possible problems, was mold slash beetles bug problem. I can tell you that that's not a problem, but I'll get into it a little bit more about why. A little about microfermentation. I said, Eddie from Davidoff loves to use that word and talk about that, but what that role is in the course of aging in a vacuum. As far as boxes, I'll go into that. You have your 50 cabs, your biggest ones, which need a special bag, which only Food Saver sells. You have to get the turkey bag. It's a bag that kind of like expands. The popcorn on a stove gets bigger and bigger. It just can fit over 50. It's the only bag that I've ever seen that does. Then you have 25 count boxes, and of course the 10 count boxes. Of course, there's one-off boxes, different sizes, but we'll go over those three sizes. How tight of a seal, what kind of bags. I said I've researched 4 bags. I email 4 bags. I do have a new preference of which bag I would use. I haven't used it yet, which is weird. I'm giving recommendation, but based off what I read and interaction with the owner, it's definitely the bag I'm going to go to, and I'll go into that. And then some air circulation. So that's another one that falls under things that rumors and problems that cigars need air circulation. They need to breathe. No, they don't. And the complete opposite of me is I see people, they build these huge walk-in humidors, and they have boxes like you would see at a store open, with just air getting to it, and just my gut just says, my God, you're just ruining. They have this beautiful, expensive collection, and it's the complete opposite. For me, for quality of cigars and taste, you're better off putting them in a seal in a box, shoved in a Tupperware in the back of your closet, than to sitting in a walk-in humidor opened with constant air circulation. So we'll get into all of that. The only thing else I wanted to bring up was when I was researching this was when I was looking for vacuum sealing, I got a few funny hits, but one of them was the seed bank up in Norway, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. Um, while obviously going for something completely different in regards to seed, the number one reason they said that what they're doing up there is they're storing it in a oxygen deprived cold environment. The reason being the same things we're doing here with cigars. Um, it's just interesting how that same concept that they're doing to extend the life is basically the same principle as cigars. So, and that's the other thing is temperatures, what temperatures we or I choose to store cigars at for long-term storing, right? Because vacuum sealing is all about long-term storage. Okay, so with that, I cut these videos into certain parts. So after this intro, I have done a handful of tests. In fact, the only test that I have not um, got result is this one. One of the videos has this cigar, so I'll say more about that in the video and in the conclusion, but I have no idea what the result of this is going to be. Now, I do not recommend storing cigars or vacuuming them in a single. They're going to squeeze and destroy your cigar. Now, I didn't care about the cigar, and I intentionally vacuumed it, the living crap out of it, because I wanted to test a gas theory, and I can tell you right now that this test failed. Okay, I was going to smoke it and see what happened, but this is a failed test. I'll get into that in the conclusion. Interesting. Learn something new. Okay. With that, the next videos will be going over how to vacuum, my process of actually vacuum sealing boxes. So I have a few boxes I'm going, so I'm going to go over the different types of boxes, which ones I recommend. Like the 10 count boxes, I do not recommend newbies. It's the structure too much and the pressure crushes. But good ones to start with would be like the wooden boxes where you can actually just run the vacuum without any problem because the box will hold and won't crush. But the standard cardboardish paper boxes. There you have to be a little careful about the crushing. So I'll go over that. The test that I have, um, that one just failed. Like I said, I'll go over that more in a second. But I did a vac seal hydrometer. So I took a hydrometer in a bag, filled it with steam. I just put it over a hot cup of water, let it get up to like 95, sealed it, and then let it run and see what happened over time, with whether or not humidity left. Then I took that cigar that was in that sealed bag, put it inside another sealed bag with a small can of gasoline. Now you can kind of tell by my reaction what happened with that cigar. So that's a failed test. Um, then the two most important tests that I did, and in reality is what in real time, what really is real world application. So one was I vacuum sealed Vita bag. So I weighed them, put them in a bag, seal them up. One was completely sealed. One had a little bit of air. Knowing what I know now, I wish I left a little bit more air because I think the test would have been a little bit more accurate. But I weighed them, left them outside in the heat, and we have very dry summers here in the Pacific Northwest. So it was, in the 20s. What was this? 45 days, month and a half ish. What was the weight after that? Then I took a box of actually that cigar that I had tossed and replaced it with the meter and sealed that box up tight and left that out. So now you have no air, but you're leaving it out in the open. So I ran that test and ran that test for the longest period of time, almost 2 months. So those are the tests I ran. So after the guide of how I do my sealing process, I go through the tests. And then after that will be the conclusion, which for me is going to happen in the next 10 seconds. All right, on to how I do my tests.
Okay, for the first example, will be just a standard box. This is a Romeo and Julieta Churchill, Cuban. Uh, I said this would be the most common box for 25. This material. Um, Now, when cutting the bag for the length, go ahead and cut the bag, seal one end. You can do a double seal, so I'm going to do double. And then leaving just a little bit of room, maybe like 2 fingers worth. Leave enough plastic at the end, roughly a hand is usually enough. Slack. It doesn't hurt to do more. Just if you do as much as I do, you tend to go through a lot of this stuff, so it can get expensive. So I try to use as little bag as possible. So make sure you just have enough there, and go ahead and place it in the bag, and we'll get going. Okay, now with the bag box in the bag, push all the way forward. You can kind of see how much slack there is. I said you start doing this enough, you know how much roughly you need. The machine you use will also vary how much slack you need. I do reuse bags. You can see there's a piece of tape here. This is from a previous one that I did. So if you do it run a little bit longer, and when you cut it, you'll have more room to play with for your next box. So you might actually save money by running a little bit long. So there's no problem with using another box as long as you cut it correctly and it was perfectly sealed when you had opened the previous box or bag. But in any other cases, or if you're not going to be cheap like me, just start with a new bag and don't go through that process. But I've been through hundreds of rolls, so it adds up quickly. Okay, we'll get going with the vacuum. A quick note on which exact brand I would use or model. As I said, Food Saver is the one that I use. It really is the best for this project. But one like this, where you see the lip here, is very low to the ground, because you can see, like in the example where the meat is, that's just where your box goes, and you can just easily just slide it right in. With the machine that I have here, it has a huge ramp, so I'm having to go up 4 inches. So I'm having to use something to get the box relatively flat. I don't recommend that. Now the reason I have this one was I had this model before. I did so many seals it broke, luckily within warranty, and they sent me this one. They said it had more bells and whistles for free. So that's why I'm using this one. But I haven't loved it, so I went already bought this one. At some point, I'll probably swap them over. As I said, stacking them up to get your box at level just gets to be annoying. Plus, the vacuum in this version is just a single button. You just hit vacuum up here. Here, it says push here and here. You actually have to use 2 fingers to push them on both sides. It's just a little frustrating to use. The only advantage of this one here is it has an open window. The other one doesn't. So you can actually see your plastic bag, make sure it's up in there far enough. That's kind of a nice feature. But aside from that, I don't recommend this particular model for this project. All right, we're off. As I said, this is the box that you most use. It's most susceptible to damage. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the pulse. So the advantage of the Food Saver, you hit that pulse button, is it stops. It's still holding a vacuum. So what you want to check is just slowly, as it does it, whether or not it has a nice firm against the box. With right here, you can see there's no indentation. Now, people who over vacuum seal, that's the first place it's going to cave in, right there in the middle of the box. So stop it beforehand. If it's not enough, you just hit that pulse button, and it'll slowly just do a little bit more until you're comfortable to where it's at. And if you've gone too far, just hit the cancel button, start on over. The other spot here is in the front. That this part will usually cave in. Sorry. This part here in the front will cave in. The lid will come over as it caves in. So you want to check that part has not caved in. So once that part there is firm against the box, that's not caved in, and the top center here is not caved in, there's no ledge, you're good to go. You can see it's just been holding here, so you can take your time to look around, no rush. I don't know if other brands have that, but the Pulse Vac is one of the most important features for being able to do this. So once you're happy, fire away, hit the seal button. Okay, with that done, pull it out, and then just make certain. You can see here, it's right against it. I'm lifting it up, and so it's flat against the box. There's little to no air in this box. It's not crushed in any way. The cigars are perfect. This is a perfect vacuum job, and this is what it should look like when you do yours.
All right, back for a box of Clementes um, from the more. I really enjoyed this cigar. It's a good morning cigar with coffee. One point I wanted to make. Good thing to check is both ends are open before you seal one. I've done that before. Got sidetracked and didn't realize. Um, Normally in these units, you'll see a vacuum button that you hit, and you'll notice that I don't do that. Um, this particular model requires you to push on both sides. Originally, I was doing this with my phone and was trying to juggle and push both of them. Of course, it wasn't working, so switched to this webcam uh, for these. But yeah, so I have to push both of these, and that's what gets to work. So, and the normal ones, you're going to just hit the vacuum button or the seal button. There's usually two buttons. You just choose between either one. As long as you're not trying to film anything with one hand. I actually kind of like this seal bar thing. Kind of neat. Okay, now this is another example where um, the box is so strong. This is a good beginner's box. Fire it in there. So I may let this one go a little bit more. With my fingers. Boom. Oh, one other point that's worth noting. Um, I've been doing some additional, more than one of these. I didn't want to record each time I do the same box. At least do a different box for the guide. Um, this unit gets hot. It melts the plastic, and I noticed if you do too many of them, you get issues with the seal. So I took a break, let it cool down a little bit, um, and then continue on. So just know that if you're doing a lot of boxes, don't just fire away, do one after another, because you're going to have seal issues. Usually you find an issue with the seals within the first week. So keep an eye for that first week, and then after that, you're usually pretty good. This one's going a little slow. It is working, it's just going slow again. Um, I put probably a little bit too much. That's the other issue. You have too much of a bag. That has a lot of air to suck out. Here you can see it. I don't know if you see where it's moving, so it's sealing. Jeez, the hard way. I can kind of see I have a view window in mine. The other version doesn't have that. I can see on one end it's a little bit low, so it's probably having a hard time getting there. But it's nice and firm against the box. Getting there anyways. A little bit of give. So if you're having this issue, I'm just going to hit cancel. If you just move it more into place and then continue. Most air, well, some air got in there. Yeah, now it's moving a lot faster, so it clearly just didn't have it in the machine, right? So listen, I don't know if this will come through, but right there, it made a different noise. This is where it's struggling. Now this is where in any other box, especially those card, those paperish box, I would hit stop. Now this box is tough. Nothing's going to happen with this box. It will not physically crush. So I just, for this example, I had just allowed it to finish on its own. Again, you're checking along here. Normally in those paper boxes, that's where it's going to crush, or in the front, where you want to pay attention to, which is why you want to hit that pulse button as you get closer. You don't do that. But in this thing is thick solid wood, so there is absolutely no issue. So a good box to start with. So, anyways, as you can see, unexpected as it goes on itself, that it's an absolutely perfect seal. Just kind of curious. Try this again. I have another this exact same box I already got ready. See if this one just fires much quicker. Tend to stock up on these sales and grab a whole bunch of my favorites and the sales in the United States for cigar boxes. So that one went a lot faster. So just a second ago, it made that noise change. That is the exact second you want to hit seal if you get to that point, if you didn't do that pulse section, because that's when it's starting to struggle. But again, I just let it go. So again, depends on the box. So anyways, I think that's it for this batch. How many did I do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 boxes in all. So I will go and put these. Now they don't have. there's no, are they, will they keep the RH where everything's fine with outside of a humidor? For the most part, and notice that I'm doing those examples, and I'll explain more of that later. But for the testing phase, I will leave these out. Um, so it's very easy to tell if I have any problem with the seal. And then maybe after about a week, I will, um, um, once I feel comfortable, then I'll put that back in the humidor. So anyways, I don't know how you see it, but anyways, it's a ton of boxes. All right, that's it for this round. Who's generally speaking, um, now this is a box of Juan Lopez, section number 1 from May 19, from a trip to Cuba. I have not sealed this one up. It's been about 5 years now at this point, because I wanted to experiment a little bit with this particular one. It has aged better, so I wanted to have it out for 5 years and then seal it. Normally, I seal within a year or 6 months for non-Cubans, or even less. Sometimes as little as 60 days after I get it, it's been acclimated. Generally speaking, you're going to go ahead and pre-make your bags. For how much length you need. For this one, he's a little bit more because it has higher. So generally in this case, when I pull it out, I generally put my hands down on each side to make sure that I have enough slack. Other times, you only need a little bit on the front after you've already made the seal, and then about a hand's addition from the end of the box to the end of the bag. That's roughly how much you need. So with that said, turn my unit on here. And the first up is Rafa Gonzalez Petite Coronas. It's the only Petite Corona I like out of Cuba. I'm just not a Petite Corona fan, just not my thing. But there's something about this particular cigar that's just so unique and different. It's a really good, like a coffee cigar. Okay, now for this box, this is, basically a light cardboard paper box, basically. So this box is going to be subjected to much more crushing force. So you have to be more careful when you do this box. You have to pay attention. So in the settings here for this one, it's just on. Now there's a setting up top here. I know the camera doesn't see it, but if you have this one, there's a dry setting and a moist setting. I always choose the moist setting when I remember. I often forget. Um, the difference between moist and dry setting is the moist setting does a fatter seal, mostly for soup, so it's hard to penetrate. So in this case, you want a better, why not? Because you're going to get a better seal if you do moist. Doesn't hurt if you do dry, but if you remember, flip it to moist. Okay, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and fire this one up. Now, what I'm looking for here as I'm paying attention is it starts to just where it gets a little snug. I usually take this long. I wonder what's going on with this bag. All the years I've done this, I've never had this problem. Let me hit cancel and pause on that one for a second. Let's try my Olivia. See what happens here. Maybe I just have a bad bag. Never had that problem before. This one's working. It still is going really slow. Really weird. Wearing these down too. All right, so as I get closer, I'm going to hit the pulse button. So now it's just pause. There's still room in here. This one has clamps here on the side of the bag here. So that's a puncture point. Sometimes I'll put tissue paper, sometimes to protect it. But in this case, it's not too bad on this particular box. This box can cave, even though it's wood, because it's kind of a thinner wood. So you never can you just let it go. But in this case, if you let this one go, even though it's a box, it will crush. This one's not enough, so I'm just going to go ahead and fire this back up. So what I'm hitting here is the pulse function, and it's kind of a manual, so you can just kind of hold it until, and as soon as you're done, you can let go. So sometimes if you hit the vacuum process, and before it's crushing, it does a seal, get really close, and then get just inch along till you're happy with the seal. It's tight around all the sides. There's no crushing yet. Normally I go a little bit further than I did before I did this. I wanted to do it for this long, but now now it has a nice um, sight tag all the way around. The box is not crushing. So at this point, I'll just go ahead and hit the seal button and let this go. That takes a few seconds, so I'll pause and come back to this box when it's done. Okay, so with that done, it has a nice good seal. You can see down there, it's nice and snug. Um, and you pull, it just gives a little bit of give, but you can tell there's no crushing. So this box is good to go. So I'll put this to the side, and I actually tape them up. I hate the loose plastic; it looks really bad. While I was pausing there, I looked here, and the seal that I did, it won't come up on video. It's not good. I've never seen that before. So somehow in the sealing process, something didn't quite seal as well. So I'm putting it back in there. In this case, I'm gonna hit the seal button first, then fire it up. Now this particular thing, brand or model number, did that vacuum sound at the beginning, which confused me at first. And I should have hit the moist, so right there. Um, case kick point that I forget often. I can redo it if I wanted to. Um, right. Yeah, that's a much better seal. First time for everything. I've done so many of these darn seal vacuums. You think I've come across every situation, but not for that one. Okay, so with that done, I just struggle to get this back into the bag. Normally I don't go lengthwise. Normally I put in the I put the box down this way, not across. But since it fit, might as well not waste plastic. So, all right, and there again, hit moist. Get there just enough, and then go ahead. And this time I'm not hitting seal because I actually want the vacuum. This time it's working. That was weird. Okay, so I'm getting close. I'm gonna hit the pulse button. In that case, it seems just about perfect. So I'm not actually don't need anything. Now if it had just a little bit of give, I would hit that pulse button or hold it down a little bit to suck more air till you got exactly where you want. And I said that's really a trick. I don't think when I see videos that people use the pulse, I don't even think they know what the pulse function is, but it's great for boxes. So anyways, that's done. Fire away with the seal button. All right. While that finishes up, I will return to my Juan Lopez. And all done. Perfect seal. That was impossible to seal, but that seal down there looks perfect. Okay. Last but not least, Juan Lopez. Now, one advantage of this one is really impossible to crush this. So this is more of a good beginner's one. You almost could just hit seal and you're good to go because you're not going to really crush this box. You'll see here that I date all my boxes because I got as much as I do. Just organizing where stuff is makes my life easier. I organize in Excel and where all my stock is. Okay. So now it's nice and kind of tight. I have a little bit more time here because I know this isn't really going to crush. Some of the bigger 50 cabs may. Just gotta hold the pulse button. It's great, but I could have kept going if I wanted to. But no, it's absolutely perfectly sealed. I yank. Oh, there's a little give. So okay. So now it's create on the side and fire away and seal that up. All right. That's all the boxes I have for the moment. I'm actually going to go grab some more. I grabbed a good sale of some non-Cubans, and it's time to vacuum seal those up. I'll shoot a video a little bit of doing those, but anyways, there's your perfect bag. Everything's good. Good to go. I realized I started a point and forgot to finish it. When in this particular model, when this bag is open on both ends here, when you hit the seal button and turn it on, in the other model, the one I prefer, it just seals. This one seems to make a vacuum noise for a few seconds and then it seals. I don't know what that's about, but it freaked me out at first because I thought I was trying to do a seal. course, I hit the cancel button, but if you're happen to use this similar model, hopefully not. I mean, it's a good unit. It's just a little more difficult to use. Okay, so that's a good seal. So when I looked at another box, I noticed the seal wasn't great, so I ended up tearing it apart and redoing it. Again, I just use these so much that I just burn through them is my problem. Okay, so for this box, I'm doing a Padron. So this is a hard box. These are already uh, boxed, pressed, so really can't do much damage with the combination of the wood. So a good box to practice with. So there we go. You can see how much there. I said about a hand's amount, roughly. Again, have my magazine for leverage for this thing. And it goes, and moist, and fire away. Now this one has a clat on the other end, but it's not too sharp, so I'm not too worried about it. All right, the pulse. All ends, looks great. All right, and then seal. And I remember moist. We're off for me. I wish there's some way to just default it so just to stay on moist. Really no disadvantage of it. Maybe it burns through, it has to do more heat. We get less seals, perhaps. Okay. So I have a perfect seal down there, a little bit of extra. One other advantage I've learned over time about having extra is you can reuse these back. So if you carefully cut it and you have a box, like the same box you want to put in, maybe get a little bit longer, or maybe you replace it with a box that's a little bit shorter that you reuse it. So anyways, looks good. So there's the collapse there. That's not causing damage. Where it does have problem is if you use Trinidad, their class are very sharp. So anytime I use a Trinidad box, I put tissue paper, toilet paper, whatever have you. Okay, and I can tell that this box isn't crushed, and it is. Here, nice and tight as I pull it. There's no flap, with no crushing. This is a perfect seal, and this is what you want. This is what you're aiming for. I said, when you're going and testing later on, you have tons of boxes, just running your finger down and seeing that it doesn't have any flapping. Even if you have a seal and it's good, but you don't have complete seal, when your finger is loose, you won't be able to tell if it's a good seal or not. This method removes all oxygen, which is really the point, and makes it easier to test, which is why I do this. So, okay, that's for the Padron box. And that's not it for this round. So as I stacked these up to put them away, just good, good, didn't work, good, 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 good. So as I said, the seal usually will fail right away because probably one of the sides. I was having a problem beginning for some reason. I had to redo it with the seal, and so it looks like this end probably wasn't that great. So anyways, so I'll go ahead and redo that one, but this camera's actually seeing the other ones. Good, 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 good. Okay, so far within 20, 30 minutes, which definitely is going to be the most likely time, and slowly over a little bit more time. At first, it's if you have a bad seal, it'll pretty much break right away. But if it's rubbing against like a bracket where it might rub a little bit, that might take a few days or up to a week to really cause an issue. So that's why you want to maintain it. But anyways, I'll go ahead and redo that one box and then put these away and see what happens in the week. All right, bye. Keep thinking I'm done, and I realize I forgot to mention something else. Um, so during this process, yet another roll. I could probably build a small house with how many rolls I've gone through over the years. But while I was grabbing it, I came across this bag. So it's the same height, 12-inch, as what would come on here. The difference between this one and I so far I've only found on Amazon or any online stores. I've never found it in the store. But it's a turkey bag, and you'll see on here it says add 5 inches. So basically, I'll roll out just a little bit. It looks like a standard bag, but actually, as you can see, it opens up. So now we're talking about a big bag. So why is this important? Um, 50 cabs. If you have a nice 50 cab of Hoyo de Monterrey Double Coronas, this is the bag that you need. It's a little bit more expensive, obviously, because it's a specialty item. Um, they had their own challenges in sealing. I find them to be a tad weaker, so you have to be really, really on it. Um, the problem is it expands, and then although there's a lot more seams that can go wrong when you're using this one. But if you have to, for any large ones that won't fit the standard 12-inch ones that you get with the the standard 12-inch, this is your only option. So um, just be careful. Whenever I use it, I like triple seal both ends because at the ends is where it kind of when you expand, you can cut. You'll see if you ever do it. Um, it it has multiple areas where you can a lot easier to break because of the expansion. It's not just a simple 12-inch flat. So, anyways, be careful with that and use if necessary. I think it was like $30 for 2 rolls of this, and it'll do like 10 cabs. So you don't need a lot of them unless you happen to get a lot of large cabs. Um, Raz 50 cabs, pretty much any 50 cabs that you'll need that for.
All right, this box is more of a word of caution. 10 count boxes, in this case the Royal Robusto here, suck. And they are the hardest to first learn. You might be better off just leaving a little bit of air in there. So it's hard to be seen in this picture, but this box is bowing, significantly. I can, there's a huge ledge right there. Where the top of my fingers, it literally drops down in there. This box was the first 10 count I did, and it was unpleasant. I opened the box. The cigars were just fine. But over the years, every time I saw this, because the box is now permanently damaged, it bows even when it's not in a vacuum seal. So after a few times, I left myself a note here saying, just leave it alone. It's fine. The cigars actually are not destroyed inside. Now, you can easily destroy cigars if you do too much. But for whatever reason, this box was okay for me, even with this bowing. So I never have needed to correct that. But since I've done this box, I've gotten a lot better at it. But just know, because of the 10 count boxes and how thin your box is, there's just not a lot of structure to hold it up against any kind of pressure, even a lower pressure one like a Food Saver. So do the 10 counts after you've mastered the other boxes, because this is just a harder box to deal with. I would demonstrate a 10 count, but I don't have any 10 count boxes right now to seal. But it's the same process, but I wasn't really doing the pulse feature back then. I kind of learned to use it later. So just maybe get it close and then start using that pulse even more when you come to a 10 count box. Any of these types of boxes in general, but the 10 count specifically is going to give you the most challenge. Stick with wood boxes to start, and then go down the path of the 25 and then down to the 10 count before you really master the art of vacuum sealing. Experiment number 1 is a bag that I've filled with steam. Let it sit for the past 8 hours. Sealed inside is my unit. You can see it is 81 degrees, rounding up slightly, at 94% humidity. The bag is slightly pillowy-ish. Plenty of air can be moved around. My control unit here says it's exactly 81 and relatively dry at 40, excuse me. I will let this sit for a month and get back to what this number is. If it is a true vacuum, this number will remain assuming at this temperature. So when I come back, I will make sure that this temperature is as close as possible. So this is one of 3 tests to show how much of a vacuum seal you truly have. Okay, for test number 3, which would be the most extreme, the first one is just checking humidity readings in a sealed bag. The second is if any water can get through a bag. I already know the answer to that, but just to cross that off the list. But this one is the most extreme. Can gas get through these bags. Now we know like Ziploc bags, those types of non-polyurethane bags are going to not work, but these bags, which are food grade bags, should be able to completely hold a vacuum. So, in order to prove it, my most extreme test, in there is a single cigar. It's kind of hard to see. It's actually sealed in a bag in the bigger bag, so it's double bagged. In the outer larger bag is a small wet cat food, so it's about 6 ounces in size, half filled. I know you can't really see it in here. I can shake if you can see there's liquid in there. It's 3 ounces, about halfway filled, of gas, motor gas. Now the idea is I'm going to be able to smell that in this bag I put open only if the bag allows gas in, which it won't, but we'll see what happens. So this will go for about the same amount of time, about a month. So there we go. Sealed gas in a bag next to a separately sealed bag with a single cigar inside. Report back in a month. One thing to note about where I live and all my testing is I live in the Pacific Northwest where we have very dry winters, summers. So as the temperature rises where I live, humidity plummets. We never have hot and humid, thank God. I don't know how anyone deals with humidity. When I go to Cuba, absolutely miserable. But you see it's 93 degrees Fahrenheit, 34 Celsius, and at 26. And as this temperature increases, we'll see the humidity drop. It kind of makes a nice situation because as the temperature drops and the humidity rises, there's an equilibrium inside my house. So in the evenings when it gets to 60-70%, when the temperature's in the upper 50s, the humidity in the house stays kind of a consistent around 60 Fahrenheit, which makes storing humidors and dealing with humidity in packs and what have you very easy where I live. So why am I bringing this up? Because bag number one, where I just had only the unit inside the bag, was a failure. Now, to reduce why the test failed, because it was around 96, when I did it, it plummeted all the way down to the 50s before I abandoned it. That bag was outside, so I don't know in the 100-degree heat, did that compromise the bag, or is the bag just not going to hold the humidity? So to make it more like a real life test, I brought it inside my garage where the temperature, you saw outside it was 93, and now we're dealing with 78. My unit out here is 80. This one's been out here a little bit longer. But you can see it's bounced between 45. It was just 45 when I started this video, 50. Kind of hops 45 to 50 in here, so it's probably around 47 at the moment. But with temperatures more like it is here, with 98% humidity, and I see it bounce around 97, 98, depending on the temperature, whether or not this is going to hold a better seal. Now, I did one other thing else differently with this retest, is I double seam both sides. This one kind of went over it so you can see it's more of a fat one versus kind of two. Either way, the point is to make a really solid seal. So with that and more favorable temperatures, to not ruin the bag, I guess being outside probably wasn't really the best choice. Because the other test I have running right now is my gas test, and I have my nose right against the gas. I mean, my nose is millimeters away from it with the plastic touching it, and I can't smell the gas at all. So that one's running great as planned, but this one failed. I have other theories of why it might fail. It may not be as bad as I think, but it's definitely interesting. I was not expecting that to have happened, especially after 3 days is when I noticed that it dropped. So redoing this test in the garage under more of a consistent 80 degrees temperature, it will swing down to around the upper 60s overnight. But mostly it will stay within a 10-degree range. More similar to what's like inside your house versus the outside where it was going from the upper 50s to over 100 degrees one of the days. With the failure of test 2, I had another idea to compare two similar situations. The failed number test 2 was due to all the open air, which suggests water vapor. But in a vacuum, I'm theorizing that that won't happen. So what I have here is a Bovita bag, completely sealed up, nice and tight. I have lots of big old seals on both ends to make sure nothing happens. 68 grams. Bag number 2. Again, lots of seals. $68 grams. This one, I let just a little bit of air. So it's not huge, but there is some air in here. This would represent a box that is not completely vacuum sealed. You leave just a little bit of a gap. So this one has the capability for air exchange, whereas this one, I believe, does not. So I'll let this sit out, nice dry condition in the 40s and 30s for the next month. It's August 1st, so we'll spend all of August, and we'll see what happens. Back with a new test. With my failure of the air and having to redo it, I decided to do an actual case with a box, and I'll explain here in a second what I'm doing. But one thing I wanted to mention in my other one that I also changed up along with the double seam was that I use a different brand. The original one that broke was a Food Seal. This one is a Wish Direct. I also have Weave Vac. If that's the other one, they're slightly cheaper. They do a better job, so we'll find out. But I just want to mention that I switched up the bag. This one that I'm using here is the same. Oh, that's interesting. Here's a pillow. But I want to point out one thing, and it's kind of hard to show in this video, that I kind of forget. So you see on the left-hand side how thin that seal is versus that one there. Actually, that kind of comes pretty well. You can see that it's like twice the thickness. This is kind of a mistake that I make because I constantly forget. You want, obviously, the bigger one. It will create a seam that will last longer. And in all food vacs, it's just a setting. Hit moist. Moist, what it does is just creates a thicker seal. Use that every single time. I forget constantly, which is maybe one reason why I have to do a few occasionally. But a lot of people probably don't even use that ever. But for cigars, important thing to use. Now, the point of this test here is to more real world example of when you remove as much air as possible versus me just testing air for humidity changes. Now I have my bag here. Again, I've done it so often that I can kind of just tell it will fit. But there it is against that seam. Obviously, now that one's no good. But that's the bag length I need. You could cut one a little large. Won't do any harm. The problem with running large, A, you're just going to run through more material, so it'll cost you more. And B, I take mine up so that it looks nice in the humidor. A lot of people just leave them sealed and throw them in there. It's big flappy ends. It just looks bad. So try to make it look as nice as I can. So the less extra plastic you have, the better. But a lot of times in the past, I did it too short and had to, cut another length for the bag. At this point, I could pretty much just send, so we'll see if this one fits, but I'm sure this one will be fine. Anyways, so what's unique about this box? It's full of cigars. And there's the reading. It was actually closer to 70. I think being in this room is bumped up a little bit. So 71 degrees inside the house and 71%. So what I expect really is closer to be 69 when this settles down a little bit. But it's completely full of cigars. There's a few extras, so I tossed enough Famosos to fill in there. The one of these actually is in the gas one. Hadn't known I was going to do this, I would have kept it and switched cigars around. But that is about as full as it's going to get. So I'll go ahead and close this up. Now, the goal here obviously is when it's sealed against and we have no air exchange whatsoever, I'm going to leave this in the garage where it will be 80 degrees, and hoping the humidity stays fairly low in the garage. It doesn't fluctuate like it does outside, so I'll have that advantage too. So staying around 45 humidity again for a month to see what happens. Perfect fit. Like I say, once you do it enough, it's like second nature. Okay, since this is a solid wood box and I've squeezed on it, pressed down on here, this is not powerful enough to do any damage. So it's probably a good box to test on. So I'll just, that's the wrong button. Do this enough. Hold on. Keep forgetting this is the one that said this is a new version for me. I don't love. You have to press down on both sides. I have to pause it while I was doing it. Sealing up again. Just kind of pull the sides. This one goes a little slower. Getting tighter and tighter. Now again, if we were doing this for real, I guess a box I would crush. Hit. Well, darn it. Do that again. New machine takes some learning. I'm pretty much getting rid of this when I'm done. Alright. Press the pulse button, the correct one, as you can see. So it's nice and tight. Maybe a little bit more. So hit the pulse. Pay attention. Looking good there. Maybe a little bit more. That's it. You gotta use the pulse for this. You can see here I'm pulling a little bit extra, which is probably going to be fine, but since it's a wood box and there's no risk of damage. Okay, so now it's nice and super tight everywhere. And a little bit loose there, so let's do a little bit more. Okay, now it's right against the box. There's no crushing. I said, easy box. I know that even if I just left it to go, it's going to be just fine. So I'm happy. Hit the seal button. All right, and it releases. Okay, with that popped out, you can see here it's flat against it. There's no crushing. Perfect. Now, interesting note on why I chose this box. So I don't know about you, but when I see the CA ratings and I see a beloved cigar gets a high score, I cringe. That's what happened to this. This was one of my favorite boxes of cigars, Cuban or non-Cuban. It got a really high score in CA, and subsequent boxes have been crap as they rush that out. And that's what happened to this box. I've had two of them. They were flavorless messes. And so what happens with this box, I actually don't really care because I'm not enjoying this box. So I don't know about you guys, but man, every time I get the magazine, I open it up and just pray that my cigar is not in there. It's kind of like the H-Up number 2, which is a cigar, probably the least favorite pyramid torpedo shape in Cuba until it got a number 1 rating. I had that box, 8 of them, and easily could get all the way until, past a year or so. It just wasn't that popular. Everyone went to everything, the other brands. But now it sells out of stock immediately, so makes me laugh. But anyways, yeah. So sad what happened to this cigar. Rest in peace, Warped. Maybe we'll try again in a few years and be happier. Anyways, okay, so this box going in the garage. We'll see what happens in a month. Interesting update on this. The sealed bag on the right-hand side, you can see everything looks good. Today is a particularly hot and dry day. The bag that has a little bit of air, you can see there on the left-hand side, there on the top, that moisture is pooling in the open areas. It'll be interesting. I'll weigh it tonight if anything evaporates from that, or does it go back into the bag. But as I said, the bag completely sealed. There's absolutely no moisture leak. So if this seal holds and it goes back in the bag, then everything's good. But there's a potential here that could be a problem. All right, time to see the results of some tests. I did all these tests around around the 20th of July. It is currently the 9th of August of September. So 4, 5, 6, 7-ish weeks. First up is the Bovita bag that has just a little bit of air, not much, but just a little bit, to see if there was any change. Now, this weighed 68 grams. It's been sitting outside mostly during the very warm and dry summer. In Oregon, it is dry one of the summer, then one day it just switches, and that day is going to be tomorrow. So this is really the last day that it'd be nice to dry out, making this test a lot more difficult. But once these tests are done, I'm actually going to seal these inside again and see if I can't extend this test, see what happens over a longer term. But over 7 weeks, let's see in roughly 20% humidity and temperatures in the 80s, 90s. A few times there's actually 100. And one day, just to kick it up a notch, I put it out in the heat, and these got hot, and the video shows that some of the water actually got into the bag, separated from the pack, and it looks like it all went back in. So there we go, whether or not it hit 68 grams. Bingo. Pack number 2, this one is completely sealed tight. Again, this one was more likely to succeed. This one, because there's a little bit of air, I thought maybe that it wouldn't. So the one with the full seal, 68. So there we have it. For all practical purposes, this seems to work. I'm still confused on the other tests where I just had air and the humidity, but at least this test, unlike the other ones, is a success. Conclusion of the second test, showing that the bag does not prevent humidity, water vapor from leaving. So this is double sealed. They're kind of overlapping. See this big fat seal, and up top, double sealed. There's not a ton of air. There's air in there, but it's fairly narrow. So there's not a lot of room for air exchange. But even given that, the outside is between 45 and 50, so it's probably the upper 40s. Around 83, I think I did 81. But you get the point that originally when I did this was in the mid 90s, and a week later, the humidity has plopped all the way down to the low 60s. So clearly, there is air exchange in these bags. So test number 2 is a failure. Third test, and I know this one's a little bit harder to see because of the light outside it is, but this one was the gas test. Now, why did I do this test? This is more of a curiosity because obviously gasoline stinks, and in this bag is gasoline, and then the other end is another cigar in a separate seal. So completely submerging back to 100% gasoline stink around it. So first thing, this is the only test that I did that had a controlled temperature. It was actually in my cigar room where the temperature was around 60 degrees. So a couple times got up to 65, but for the most part it stayed consistent. So point number 1, you can see the gasoline is still in here. There's a little bit fell off when I moved it out here, but aside from that, it's the same amount of gas. It didn't go anywhere. So I'm going to cut this open, just to get an idea. Because right now, if you put your nose against it, you cannot smell the gasoline at all. It smells nice and clean. Gasoline out. Mixed with a little bit of extra cat food. Yum. Whoa, Jesus. Okay, that smells like gasoline. I'm glad that did not get in my cigar room. And we have a cigar. Now, what I'm going to do with this, and I'll do this later and talk about it in my wrap-up, is I'm going to let there's a little bit of gasoline on the package from moving. I don't think it was on there all along, but just moving out here. This cigar was pretty smushed in there. I didn't really care. The idea was to seal this as much as I could to keep the gas out and not worry about the condition of the cigar. It's more of a throwaway cigar. So anyways, I
I will cut this later once all the gasoline is dissipated off of it and no smell can get in from just opening it. Confirm whether or not any gas is inside here. And as crazy as it is, as long as there is no smell, I will take a few puffs of this cigar and see what happens from it. Now we come to the most important test. Completely sealed. Now, this test could be the only one that was a failure, as I put in here a meter to see what the humidity is. During this, I went through a rash of dead units that had replaced the battery. So if I cut this open and it's dead, that was a wasted few months. So I was nervous about that. But when I locked this in, it was 71 degrees and 71% humidity. I said this is the most important test because what is it in all practical cases? So let's see. So what I want to see. 71. It's 74 out here, so it's just a little bit warmer. But out inside the house, where it's been in the upper 60s. Come on, don't be dead. Don't be dead. Yes. 71 degrees and 72%. So that's the exact temperature it went in, so that was convenient. And given that these can have a small variation, I'm actually okay with the 72. I'm glad my Famosos is going to be good, so I don't really care about the rest of these cigars. Really unfortunate what happened with this box, but that's pretty cool. That makes me happy. I said this has been sitting not inside a humidor, it's just been sitting out in my kitchen. So, what to make of this? Well, contemplate this a little bit as I do my wrap up, but I consider this success. Already dropped down. Let me it that way, but it's already dropped to 64%. But when I had first opened it up, it was 72, 71. So, hurrah!
Welcome back to a Bagman presentation on vacuum sealing. I am Bagman. In the intro, which I just did, um, I left out something. In the world of people who do sealing and know it works, because all you have to do is do it and know it works. If you're the only people who say it doesn't work are people who didn't do it or people who are doing it wrong. Um, a person at Famous Smoke, a executive editor by the name of Gary Kobe, wrote an article called "Sucking the Life Out of a Cigar" from Famous Smoke, online store here in the States. You can Google if you want to see the whole article. Just Google "Sucking the Life Out of a Cigar." I'm just going to paraphrase of what that's in there because this is exactly the frustration that we did. He wrote this based off a question that someone asked, and he clearly has never done it and has opinions on it. And then there's a follow up, which is even more entertaining. But, anyways, someone wrote in and it says, if you put cigars in the newest craze, the food server flavor, will they keep? And if so, how long? This is a vacuum packed machine that claims to maintain freshness a lot longer. Will they still be required to be stored in humidor? Also, can you freeze cigars, and if so, for how long? Um, the main question. Gary Cope responds back, the executive director of this magazine or shop. Vacuum packing, they will probably last quite some time in that state. But I wouldn't bet again, hasn't tried it. Let's throw an opinion. But at least he says he's not claiming to be an expert on it. I'll give him that. That they'll be good over a longer period of time, unless maybe you did keep them in the humidor. They could possibly dry out. But if you didn't keep in the humidor, what's the point? What's the point? So clearly, this guy thinks that the only reason you vacuum seal is to avoid a humidor situation. No. Um, Even the guy, in the question above says that they last longer. He decides to change the question to will they last outside of a humidor? But side point. Vacuum packing means that They are devoid of air, which cigars need too. No, they don't. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you do plan to freeze them immediately afterwards. What does that have to do with anything? Or they may eventually dry out. So again, back to his point that if you leave it outside of a humidor, it's going to dry out unless you put it in your freezer. Again, my freezer experiment, pot, kettle, but that's not what he's going for here. So I don't even know what he's bringing up for the freezer perspective. But I'm sure I'd be curious to find out how long they would keep. So, give him credit, he has a little bit of curiosity. He responds to his own response here. Q&A update. Since originally posting this on the Food Saver, I received the following response, which I think you should find very interesting. So someone wrote in and replied to this post that he did. I'm gonna call myself because this is what we deal with. God help everyone. This is a person writing in. This is an executive director, so this is their view of the situation. I once ran out of room in my humidor and used the Food Saver on 10 Coronas. I knew I had made a mistake instantly. As the air left the bag, I watched 10 cigars go from a 44 to a 34 ring gauge. Okay. Lesson number 1, do not let it run until they crush your cigars. I couldn't stop the machine from pulling out of air out of the bag. There's like 4 different ways to stop it. You can hit the cancel button. You can hit the seal button. There's a pulse button. Some of them have a knob to just immediately stop, or a power button, one of the two. Literally almost every button on the machine will stop the process. But this person decided to scrunch his cigars from a 44 to a 34 and then decided to tell right in talking about vacuum sealing. For the heck of it, I took them out of the bag after 45 days. They gained a unique Food Saver pressed look. I wonder why. They're very hard creases in the wrapper. To my amazement, they sprung back from a 44 to a 34 back to a 44. But eventually the wrapper split from the loss of humidity. They suffered from the extreme contraction expansion. My general feeling is that this should never be done again, and I would never want anyone else to find out the hard way. I shouldn't have noticed it was called a Food Saver. That's just painful to read. Anyone who experienced that, I hope you saw my guide step by step on what I did to avoid whatever this individual did. All right. Erase that from my brain. That person will be online tomorrow telling me that vacuum sealing is stupid. Now, one thing I wanted to point out, then doing this research, the pulse function. Now, I said the pulse function is one of the best things you can do. However, in research, not all machines have it, as it turns out. Now, the machine I suggested does have it. The machine I used, I said I got because it was free and it was a little more fancy, turned out the pulse function is actually significantly better than the version I did, not the version I recommend. Because mine will easily go from vacuum sealing to pause, then pulse to get rid of that little bit of air. The Food Saver that I recommend, you have to hit different modes. So you either choose the vacuum mode, or you can choose the pulse option. I don't know, because I haven't used that particular one yet, whether or not you can use the vacuum, pause it, then change the mode, and then use pulse. If that doesn't work, what you can do is just go to the pulse mode from the get-go and just hold the button down, and instead of the machine doing it automatically, just hold it the entire time until you feel comfortable that it's sealed enough. So either way, make sure if you're using this, if you haven't got a machine yet, that it has a pulse function. At some point, you don't need it. Quite honestly, I've done so many of them. I literally can do it without even. I can do it blindfolded. Machine makes a noise. You know exactly when it makes that slight uptick in noise is the second you stop. But Again, that takes practice and doing it long enough time. I wouldn't go by noise at the get-go, but just keeping a look on how tight it is, because it's important that it's tight. And I said we'll get into that here in a second. Here. Now let's go through my tests. Now some of them failed. One of them, when I was doing it, I didn't know why. I now know. So before I get into that, I'm going to get into the bag, what the bag is made of. So you have the polyethylene, the PE, or the PA/nylon. Now, what I've learned from this is, in the study, is that PE is best at reducing water vapor, and nylon is best for reducing oxygen. That is an important thing that I did not know when I did this. So what you want is a bag that has more nylon than PE. Now, not all manufacturers make it easy to find. Now, I had them all except for one, and I thought I had it when I was in the video. I can't delay this any longer. Also, another week before I do this video, I'll post that result in my comment section when they reply back, because I just emailed them this morning, not giving them enough time to respond back. But the ratio that you want is going to be more PA. You want more nylon, because we are not looking, I'm not looking for well, I should say more importantly, I care about oxygen. I want no oxygen. Now, there's this material called EVO. When I was emailing one of the manufacturers, EVO, which is, I didn't even know what it was, and stand for ethylene vinyl alcohol polymer, which is a complete oxygen barrier. Now, there's a difference between is 100% as a barrier, or is it in practical purposes a barrier? And the bags that we use commercially are good enough. Now, there are certain ones that do a better job, and I said I have recommendation of those. Now, the 4 that I tested, I did the Food Saver, obviously the most common one. Wish Direct, WeVac, and a company called Out of Air. Now, the thickness of the bag is just as equally as important. So the Food Saver, now there's 2 sides. So there's the smooth side and there's the texture side. Food Saver is 3 mil on the smooth, 9 on the rugged side, texture side. They have 5 layers, 4 layers of PE, 1 nylon. So that makes it a 20% nylon. That is on the bottom range. So interesting to think that Food Saver is the least of the suggestions for cigar long-term storage. If you want longer term, obviously ones that have a higher. Now, Wish Direct and WeVac are pretty much the same. They're 4, so they're a little bit bigger on the smooth side, 8 on the textured side. So again, adding them both together, they're 12. Both of them are 30% nylon. So 20 to 30%, you're going to have a better oxygen block. Now, important that if you go this route, you're still keeping your cigars in a humidor. And this is what's crazy to me. People will spend all this money on the cigars, and if you're going down this route for vacuum sealing, you will spend all this money, but then you'll go cheap by wanting to store it outside of a humidor. All you need to do is buy a Tupperware, toss all your vacuum seal boxes in there, put in 1 meter, maybe a few burrito packs, crystals, whatever you like using. The net cost for storing 20 boxes would be like $30, $40. So it's crazy. So I recommend, I said, oxygen is my #1 priority. I do not want oxygen getting into my cigars, which is why I vacuum seal as much as I can out. Now, Out of Air, the 4th brand, is 4 on the smooth, 10 on the texture. So that makes them 14. So they're the thickest of them all. They use 7 layers. Now, I'm led to believe, I said this is the company I said will get back to me. It's 2 nylon, 5 PE. Now, whatever the correct one is, I'll put down there. So that would put them at the higher range of oxygen barrier. Now, if you want to do food, you want to do freezer, obviously maybe PE is going to be a little bit more important to you than nylon. But for our purposes, for cigars, based off what you have here, the recommendation that I have now is out of air. Now, I haven't used them. I'm going by their stats. I'm going by the emails, which I'm going to go through here in a little bit. Of the companies I emailed, out of air was the most responsive, informative. It's actually, unless I use a default name for everyone, actually was emailing the owner of the company, which was pretty cool. Um, and I appreciate actually reaching out to him because the whole PA PE ratio thing I was wrong on. So they talk about it's kind of like golf scores, which is lower permeability or higher, which one's right, and I had it backwards. And so I was kind of lashing out on him that his bag is a claim that it was better than Food Saver and what have you until I click, and then so he got my frustration at the very end, like, man, I do all this stuff and I still don't understand it. So, anyways, back on track. Thanks to the owner of Out of Air. So big thumbs up, and just based off his response is why I said I'm probably going to start going over to his bags from this point on. WeVac, another company, actually pretty good response too, and I'll go over their email as well. Wish Direct was kind of, man, in mine, I didn't ask a lot of great questions for Wish Direct, so it was partially my fault, but and Bar, not Food Saver, was the worst. Getting response out of them is a pain in the butt. I actually even had to call them this morning to get further information on something. They did answer the phone, but they didn't want to answer the question at first. And I really pressed and asked the supervisors, and like reluctantly wanted to give me some information in regards to the millimeters and mils, excuse me, of the bags and the stats. I just want to double check all my numbers. So I had them at one point, but somehow I lost the link to it and wanted to confirm with them. In regards to that, in my research, I came across a very interesting article from the National Research Council of Canada. Now, this is what got me on the PA and the PE ratio. And it was an article, a research they did, permeability of oxygen and water vapor through PE and nylon films. And their quick summary is, oxygen and water vapor permeability studies were carried out on binary PE nylon blends. Now, I'm going to get a little bit of the detail, I'll skip over it. You can Google that, permeability of oxygen, National Research of Council of Canada, if you want the full article. But a lot of times when I email people, they give me these super technical questions and like way over my head, so I won't throw you there. But in conclusion, it was found that the incorporation of nylon into PE reduces the oxygen permeability. Now, this is where I got screwed up. Reduces is bad. In this case, it's good. While water vapor increased. So, more nylon, better oxygen block, but more water vapor. But as far as going aging, that doesn't matter. The water vapor going back and forth doesn't matter. But that is why my test failed. So when I put the meter inside a bag with air, because water vapor can just go in and out. And it also has to do with the pressurization of the seal you do, which is again why I was saying earlier about what's more important, the seal or the vacuum. And it's summed up in an email from one of the vendors I'll get to as well. So anyways, they go further into this, that water vapor permeability is increased in the range of 0 to 30 weight percent PA oxygen permeability. PE reduced. Anyways, they go through the numbers and explaining this further. But long story short, nylon blocks oxygen, PE blocks water vapor. So obviously you need both. You can't have one or the other. So, or you can, like the PE, like a Ziploc, sandwich bag is pretty much 100% PE, which was why oxygen goes right through it. Put a sandwich in there, seal it up, it's going to be nasty. But water won't get into it. So, interesting article that I read on that. Hopefully that explains that a little bit. Now, going back to the test. So, yeah, the meter in the bag, open, air just bled in and out. It lasted about 2-3 days, if I remember. The test failed almost immediately. I started all tests in the mid to late July, and it failed. So been a few months. I might have said something in the video. Oh, I should mention that all these videos that I said is shot out of order. So sometimes if I'm talking in the past or present, because um, the way the video will play versus the way it's shot it is different. So I apologize for that. I'm no video expert. But anyways, so if you, the lesson learned from that is you must keep your boxes in some kind of humidor. I said earlier, it's cheap. Don't waste your cigars because you're too cheap to spend $40 on a cheapy plastic container. Um, the gas experiment was interesting because we smelled the bag. Me and a neighbor of mine who had really good smelling could smell gas through it. And so when I opened it up, the gas had all stayed in liquid form in the container. So I really thought this was a success. So I was going to smoke that cigar that was in the bag, sealed within the bag. But as you saw in my intro, when I opened that bag, the gas clearly got in. So yes, gas is, it gets right through those bags. So what does that mean for cigars? Not much. It's just more of a talking point of what those bags can and can't do. So um, yeah, if anyone got a hint, even a teeny hint of gas, I wasn't going to smoke that cigar. But when I pulled that out, yeah, it stunk. So that failed. Now, as you saw with the bags, they were 68, the Bovita bags, they were 68 grams, and they stayed that way. Now, why? Because they were in 20% humidity for a month and a half, 2 months, because of the seal. Now, I think over a longer period of time, it would slowly, but because of the seal, the vacuum, there wasn't enough air exchange. Now, as I said, I wish I had done another example that I had more air in there so that air could more easily exchange. Then that water vapor would have gone out. So it was neat that the experiment succeeded. And I said it was extreme. It was 65% humidity bags that were in there sitting in 20% humidity for a long time. And even that one day was, I just to speed it up, I literally put it under the sun in one of the hottest days we had, well over 100, and just beat on that bag. You saw the water actually pull away from the bag and go into the plastic a little bit, sucked it right back up, and there was no weight change. So those bags, I should say, are still sealed. Right now, we're kind of moving to the higher humidity. Right now is 58%. As though when the winter comes here in about a month or so, they'll get dry in the house, and I'll probably just put them in the house and leave them all winter long and see what happens over the long term. And I'll put the results of that in 6, 8 months in the comment in the note section of this video. But for now, they didn't change at all. But most important of all was the meter inside the sealed box. Now that was a full seal. It was a wood box, as I mentioned. I just let it go and let it seal completely because that full cedar box wasn't going to crush. So that was as good as vacuum as a food saver can do. Yeah, you can buy a bigger brand, stronger one, but you don't want to do that. And of course, you saw I took it out. It was perfect. Now it went up 1%. Now I was thinking about that. That had to do with the timing of when I probably put that meter. It probably was still kind of bouncing back and forth because it was sitting outside in 20% humidity. So if there was any change in humidity, that number would have dropped, not increased. So the fact that it went up 1% is irrelevant. So in practical sense, when you have a bag, a box, and you seal it completely, no air, the humidity is going to remain fairly rock solid for a while. And knowing that those bags are mostly PA nylon or have a higher, I should say, a higher amount of nylon, the oxygen wasn't going in there as well. Now it'd be interesting to have tried that cigar, because it's been sitting out for a couple months and see how it is. Generally, I haven't left cigars out to smoke, sitting in a seal for 2 months. So the gas experiment failed me twice in that regard. So unfortunately, so I guess next time I'll have to seal up another box and see what happens over a longer period of time. Okay. With that, when should you vacuum? Now this has a little asterisk next to it. For me, when it comes to non-Cuban cigars, it depends on transit time. But generally, if you get it within a week, I usually vacuum seal within 30 to 60 days. Cuban cigars. I waited, here's the extra part, for whatever was longer, 1 year post the box date, or 90 days if it took a while to get it to you. Now, if you got within a week, you're lucky to live next to a place that sends them. You live in Europe and it takes 2 days to get it from any of those locations, then maybe not as long. But so if I get a box that's been a year and a half old and already, I'll also let it sit for 3 months. Now, the asterisk part. The experiment started back in 2007-ish, based off non-Cubans because they were ready to smoke now, whereas Cubans needed at least a little bit of time before they were approachable. 2023 and 2024 cigars, from what I'm reading, I've not had one. I've not even had a 21 cigar. The oldest cigar I've had a handful of 20. Most of I've smoked was through 2019. Advantage of vacuum sealing and having a large collection. But that people are saying that it's ready to smoke right away. That gives me concern that we may have to treat cigars like that as non-Cubans and vacuum seal them sooner. I don't have any information. Haven't done it. It will take a while to know, but just from what, based off my experience, I feel like maybe 6 months. That's just a hard call. So I can tell you what I've done in the past for my cigars through, what was it, 21 before the rules changed and hard to get cigars now. But judgment call on your part, but you can just go, the fact that how I did it with non-Cubans might be treated like Cubans these days. So experiment. I likely won't. I'm not really in the Cuban cigar world anymore. I have plenty. I don't have to worry about it now, but I'm not going to buy anymore. So knowing how to vacuum seal newer Cubans is not going to be my specialty. All right. With that, I want to get to my emails, but prior to that, I found a feedback from a Mad Dog. He's an admin at Cigar Weekly. He wrote a very great article. So if you want to look him up, he's at Cigar Weekly, Mad Dog. You can Google vacuum sealing results and put in Mad Dog and Cigar Weekly, but I'll paraphrase. With the renewed interest, this is him writing this at this point, with this new renewed interest in vacuum sealing cigars intended for long-term aging showing up here, Cigar Weekly, I wanted to post a report on some tangible findings. My good friend Gary Benicio, maybe someone in the cigar world, I don't know this individual, is, as far as I know, the person who originally came up with the idea of using vacuum sealing to radically limit the amount of oxygen that cigars are exposed to as they age. I doubt he invented it. I'm sure a ton of us came across it on our own, but whatever. Oxygen destroys a wide range of fragile aromatic compounds. That's simple fact. Gary's thinking is that such compounds are likely what lend much of the aromatic essence to the flavor profile of young cigars, and young Cuban cigars in particular. I've known Gary long enough and smoked enough cigars that he's gifted to me over the years, and talked to him in sufficient length to have complete faith in his opinions concerning all things Habanos related. It was therefore pretty easy for me to make the decision to vacuum seal those Habanos I bought with specific intent to age 5 more years. While he was aging, he said a couple weeks ago, Gary sent me a Bolivar BF that he had kept vacuum sealed for 7 years. So this is neat because I don't really see a lot of people responding back to their experience of it, but this person did and wrote wonderful. He wanted to get a better idea for the benefit of this process and asked me to test one out what I thought. This cigar was a revelation. Now, granted, this was an old school BBF, and although Gary hasn't told me what the box code was, it couldn't have been younger than 2002. Oh, it's important to note that this was written in 2009. So at this point, he's talking 7 years. It was beautifully constructed, rolled in a nearly flawless light Colorado wrapper, lightly sheen with oil and water with slightly darker oils coming up through the wrapper from the binder. The aroma was just outstanding. The cigar still smelled fresh. I took a conservative straight clip, and the draw was perfect, just the right amount of resistance. Pre-light flavors were complex, Cuban all the way, and promised great things to come right from the first draw. I knew this was going to be a winner. All right, skipping through a little bit. This cigar combined the best aspects of both fresh and aged BVFs. It was still kind of brash and still tasted fresh, but there was no greenness in it at all. No harshness. It was aromatic, yet very refined and complex at the same time. The smoke was dense. And all the cigar was everything I'd hoped for it might be. I went to the determination to find any off flavors that might be present, but I found none. The cigar achieved what I had hoped from the beginning to get from the vacuum sealing, meddling the flavors of a young Cuban cigar with the elegance and complexity of an aged Cuban cigar. Now, there's more if you want to read this entire write-up, but that was really well written, and that is the experience that I get. I said I wish there was more articles, people wrote stuff like this, because I've yet to come across an article. Someone said I probably sealed it and the flavors were bad. So, with that, let's get to the emails. Now, as I said, I emailed all 4 of them, all the 4 companies that I had mentioned. I will start with Food Saver, and I literally asked them a very little. As I try to ask different questions, I was trying to get whether a response because I want to understand more, whether or not they knew much, and they didn't respond. So I had to call them, get that information. So, not happy with them. Wish Direct. This is a company that actually uses their product quite a bit. And I asked them what was their ratio. Now they quickly responded and said that what they use is 30% PA, 70% PE, LDPE. So there's the density of the low and the high is the hard plastic stuff. So all material is food safe and FDA certified. That part doesn't really matter as much. But it was nice that was not on their page. It was nice that they replied back and told me that. I'd asked them another question. They didn't respond to that one. It was a little more technical. I think the person I was talking to probably had a little bit of script, so they didn't have as much. VVAC had one of the better responses. So I asked them, I said, question on air permeability of your bags. Are they fully non-air permeable, meaning no gas, oxygen, carbon dioxide can exchange through the bag in a vacuum seal? Curious to know if I sealed something up, would I have 0 air exchange over the many years my box would be sealed up. Again, as I wrote all these, I didn't tell them what I was doing, so every answer they assumed I was doing food. Their response back was very detailed, which means that they knew what they were talking about. So, big plus for them. And it says, actually, according to our standards, vacuum bags primarily block oxygen and water vapor. Remember, that was, at the beginning when I was doing this, you got to remember the 2 parts. When I was always arguing this earlier, I was always, as a single part, wasn't blocking everything, but, blocking the 2. Rather than being completely impermeable, they are required to meet certain permeability standards, such as the oxygen, and they give you some complex number, and the water vapor. So they separate out the 2 numbers and what has to go through. And the time for keep the vacuum is related to the pressure value in which the vacuum machine can create. Now, this is the point I was talking about earlier. What's important? Just the seal or the vacuum? In this email, WeVac confirms that you need to have a good seal. So even some informed people have mentioned get it close enough and seal it. And the answer is not really. Now, if you're going to do it for 5 years, 8 years probably won't matter. But if you're in my world, that some of my boxes are going to be sitting there for 30 years, it's going to matter. But again, why not just do it? It doesn't hurt unless you crush the box, of course. Um, in addition to that, the longer the contents can be preserved, basically saying that the vacuum will last longer the tighter that you do it. Um, that was quite informative for me. Um, long story short from that was just understanding the pressure that you need to create in a vacuum. Now, if you want any better, you get a better machine, suck you in every ounce of oxygen, but the problem that we have is box crushing, right? So there's obviously a level that you can only go to. Okay. And lastly, out of air, my new vendor. Um, as I said, unfortunately with him, when I got the whole PAPE thing backwards, he was nice enough, kind enough to respond back. And after getting that information correct in my brain, he said, what you want to look at is the OTR rate for these materials, talking about nylon and PE. The OTR for nylon is usually around 0.06 to 0.31 cubic inches of oxygen over 100 square inches of material per day. Okay, what does that number mean? It means get a degree in this field and you know fuller what that means. But comparison. PE is on the order of 60 to 600. So we're talking 0.06, 0.31 to 60 to 600. So obviously the point being is, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about clearly. And just the amount of oxygen, the difference between between the nylon and the PE. When I responded back to that, because I was kind of impressed with this answer, his response back was right. So we went to reduce oxygen permeability, to which, as to what materials are best, he then gives me the Evo or Mylar. Now, I don't know about Mylar. I did search Evo, and they do make bags. You actually can buy them. He mentions that it would increase the cost quite a bit. I was looking online; they're only like 20 cents for a bag that would fit a cigar, so it's not that much. But you can't just use an Evo. So I guess you'd have to do an Evo bag and then a bag over. But now we're getting to that level, and don't worry about that. But it's interesting to just know what materials are going to use for the best. Obviously, they're not going to go down that route. But then he mentioned in there that oxygen absorbers can be used to mitigate this as well if you're going to go with the traditional bags. Now, the reason I bring up oxygen absorbers is I haven't tried that. Be interested to try it. If anyone's ever tried it, please let me know. I'm curious. I think when you vacuum seal, there's so little, like it's not really necessary. But that is an option. You can go on Amazon and look up oxygen absorbers. Okay. With that, the last piece that I wanted to cover was Min Ranim. Now, he was the person who came up with this. If you've ever heard this term, it's called the maturation, the first maturation, the second maturation. He went to long-term studies. Now, I said he's passed away this year. His knowledge is based a little bit more on cigars from yesteryear, not anything with what cigars are like today. Canned cigars from 2023 age like they did back then. Now, they made this argument back in, 2002, 3, when they made the change. They said Cubans will not age like they did from the 80s and 90s, from the cigars in 2003 and on. And so far, that has been proven not to be accurate. But again, we're only talking, 20 years. So we don't really know. But now they're changing again. I have thoughts of why the cigars are changing now. It's not change in the seed or anything. It's a change in the process that they're doing. But that's just a theory. I won't even get into it. So anyways, he's written many things about this. I'm going to kind of paraphrase some of the stuff that he was written, because most people consider him a god in regards to understanding how cigars age. And he overall was very opinionated that oxygen needs to be reduced and temperature needs to be reduced. So, when you vacuum seal these cigars, you don't just want to seal them up without any oxygen and just toss them in some room. You want to keep that temperature low, right? The humidity that's in these bags, you want to get in the low 60s. And ideally, you want to keep the cigars as close to 60 as you can, maybe even a little lower. You can pull it off. There's a great video of the Davidoff store where they um, gave a tour to someone from Cigar Aficionado, James Suckling, where he talked about how cold the room was and all his cigars were in cardboard boxes. I mean, they were, a lot of people like, well, you need to have air exchange and all this stuff. Well, go to the Davidoff stuff, go to the downstairs. They allow you. I don't know, it was years and years ago that I did it. I don't know if they do it anymore. But other stuff is in boxes and labeled, do not open, some year into the future. As much rotation as they do, they don't rotate each cigar. They don't even open up the box. They flip the whole box upside down. Even they admit they're not even sure it works, but they have a gut feeling that it does. But low temperature, low humidity, combined with vacuum sealing is what's going to get you 20, 30 years. So Minrani's point on this was, this is all his words here. So it goes to the theory, less air means less oxygen. And he's not talking about vacuum sealing, I should just point out just how he's personally storing. And less oxygen means slower aging. Age-related development via oxidation, chemical reactions that occur in the presence of oxygen, is a process that takes place in many consumables that require an attribute called complexity. For example, wines and spirits, in barrels, tea, beef, cheese, and tobacco. I believe for best aging, you need to reduce oxygen, humidity, and temperature. Another quote, I have noted one member here states that oxygen has nothing to do with fermentation. Right. So a theory that's out there is if there's no oxygen, is there any fermentation, is micro fermentation going on? Now, some people, as Eddie that I mentioned, says, not really. I say it does, very slowly. Back to Minrani, every book about tobacco manufacturing I have read says that fermentation of tobacco requires and consumes oxygen. In short, no oxygen, no fermentation. I like to see scientific papers say otherwise. A Nobel Prize is waiting for you. If the member cannot produce any scientific evidence, just in my opinion, then please do not waste people's time. I should note that apparently Minrani, being as brilliant it is, like to flame forums and cause problems. Interesting personality splits there. So the other thing that he gets into is beetles and mold. Now, the concern I had when I was doing this was mold and beetles would grow. Now you could freeze and not worry about that, but in an environment you wouldn't know because this was sealed up. Of course, if you had a beetle outbreak, it would be, unless you saw it coming eating through the bag, it would be restricted to that one box. Worst case scenario, right? Which is actually kind of a good thing. But when you keep it at the low temperature, keep it at the low humidity, you're not going to have mold. And he writes, Minrani, beetles cannot live within a sealed box as fermentation would have consumed all oxygen available. And then further on mold, he writes, when the humidity is 70% or higher, molds can also grow in environments with less water that require bacteria, which is why, sorry, my screen went blank. Which is why molds grow even on dry foods. However, mold cannot grow without oxygen, and almost all mold requires temperatures between 50 and 85 degrees. As mold grows, it consumes oxygen and it gives off carbon dioxide. Basically saying is that even if it had a small mold outbreak, it would die within itself in a short period of time. So with that understanding, I stopped worrying about mold and beetles and what have you. I mean, I said the temperature that I keep mine is 60 degrees year round. Obviously, a little harder in the summers. I have a mini split AC cranking down to 60. And the rest of the year is just sitting in a coldest part of my house. But it's interesting what his opinion of was, and his opinion of this was years and years ago. So he was so ahead of our time. But taking that knowledge that he had and applying vacuum sealing to take it a step further, It'd been interesting to pick his brain about vacuum sealing, and I'm not aware of anything he wrote about vacuum sealing. There was rumor that he wrote a second book. There's an individual by the name of Nino said he saw that the book was completed, and he passed away, and I didn't see any word about that. So unfortunately, the two people know are now passed. Um, but one little side note on here, I also look how long can mold spores last. Um, so you don't have any mold, but you have spores, right? They can last indefinitely. So if you think you got rid of mold permanently, just no, that's not. I mean, that's kind of a side note, but I was just um, interested to mold will never exactly go away. Okay, so with that, um, the only part I want to summarize on is the most frustrating thing I hear from people, and I mentioned it at my intro. People telling you that you need air circulation, you need them to breathe, and everything that I've tested, everything I've done, the decades of I had cigars say that is absolutely, uncategorically not true. Now, I can sit here and post this on forum and have everyone blast me. I just don't even bother anymore, and people want to believe whatever you want. But or you take people like me who have vacuum sealed. Literally, I don't rotate my cigars. I never open them once a year like some people suggest. They just sit in a state of almost no oxygen exchange and a little bit of water vapor exchange. How much is unknown. Um, I would like to put a meter in a box and see what happens after 2 years. But the problem is they're all battery operated and they don't last that long. So it was a good way to figure that out. Um, it'd be great to know if you just left a box out. Like that box I have, it's pretty disposable. If I had some meter that would last 2 years, I would definitely put that in that box. So um, I guess that's mostly my wrap up. I hope that you found this informational. I know I went to a lot of the technical portion of it, and I said, understanding the PE versus nylon, I unbelievable amount of time trying to fully explain that to everyone, to understand myself so I can explain it. So, and the worst thing is, you become an expert on something, and then someone asks you a question, you don't have an answer, then, all your credibility. So the idea is, I have enough credibility that I've done this research. Now, then Ronnie had some interesting opinions that have proven over time to be not entirely true. So I don't know, 6 years from now, things we've learned are actually not true, and I'll have to redo a video or do an update video of additional stuff that I've learned, and I may very well do that as I'm going to continue to study the subject. But having said that, the most important thing is what does the cigar taste like sitting in a seal? So in my next video, which will start immediately after this, which I said I shot on the 4th of July, and you hear fireworks in the background, and today is the 23rd of September. Um, you'll see what I think of a box that I've aged for 2 years and then put in a vacuum seal for 7. Um, and for the record on that one, I opened the seal and I had that cigar that I had that day. Some people have said that they go through like a secondary sick period after being open, like you can have them for a few weeks, but then start to develop. I've never experienced that. If you properly put the cigars in the seal when they're ready. If you put it too early, then yeah, they might go through that sick period. But if you kind of follow the time periods that I mentioned earlier, you should not experience that. Because I generally smoke the first cigar out of the seal the day I open it, and I've never had a problem. And I've smoked like one a week or so after it, and I never noticed any dip or anything. They're just good. Um, but in the end, this is all about that goofy thing that I believed at the beginning, and a lot of cigar people believe this, that there's a little chart: time, flavor intensity, or enjoyment, whatever you want to call it. That as time goes on, the cigar just gets better and better and better. Right? There's a lot of people who believe that's just a straight line: zero satisfaction, 30 years, 100% satisfaction. That's just a straight line. That's not the case, and people who've smoked cigars long enough, eventually know that too, which is why the whole purpose of vacuum sealing is I'm trying to maintain when they're the best. For me, most cigars is between 5, 8, maybe a few other ones will get up to 10 is the sweet spot. So my goal in this project was to enjoy a 5 to 8 year old cigar 30 years from now. Now, ultimately, why did I make that decision? Obviously, because I had too many cigars. Also, let's face it, cigar rules are changing, and in 30 years from now, are you even going to be able to buy a cigar? I have my doubts. More and more countries like New Zealand going to those generational bans where anyone over a certain age permanently can never smoke, or just making plain packaging and endless rules. You can't smoke anywhere. Um, so I wanted to find a way to enjoy my hobby for as long as I possibly thought. And hopefully, I die with a handful of cigars to give away to my beneficiaries. But fingers crossed, I timed the amount of cigars I bought with my lifespan. So we shall see. Anyways, onto the video of my enjoyment of the cigar I had in vacuum seal, and that should wrap everything else up. If you have any questions, just go ahead and drop me a line or a comment or whatever you do. I said I am no video expert. The next step I have after this is how do I put all these videos together, and I'm obviously no expert in this whatsoever, so it'll be an interesting thing. So I apologize for the quality, and sometimes I use a microphone, sometimes I didn't. I start off using my camera phone, and this time I'm using a webcam, learning along the way. So anyway, I hope you enjoy. Any questions, let me know. Other than that, enjoy vacuum sealing, and I wish you luck. Thank you much.
In reviewing the video I put together, I noticed I missed a few questions I just want to add before I close this off. Um, one of the most common questions I get is around the Bovita bag. Should you put it in a seal? I said I was going to mention, but of course I didn't answer it. The answer is no, you do not. And the main reason is it doesn't do any good. Through my tests, what I determined was that the better seal that you vacuum that you do, the better the results. Now, if you have a Bovita bag smushed across the top of the box, the vacuum, it doesn't have anywhere to go except out the bag or through the wood. So unless the top of the box or wherever the bag is in your seal, it has to actually moisten the box to get into the cigar. So it's not going to do any good. It's not going to do any harm, but it doesn't do any good. So absolutely no reason to do it. I'm thinking that if it's against the top of the box, if you want to put it in there to see if it maintains moisture, even then I don't think it wouldn't really tell you anything about how it's going on inside the box because it's smushed right across the top. Now, if you person wants to leave a little bit of air, and I don't recommend you do, all the tests that I've shown read saying that you must actually pull a vacuum, not just pull out as much oxygen and then seal it. That you actually need to vacuum it, which means tight against the box. It means the Bovita bag won't do any good. The only other thing I want to mention was that in my tests, I noticed that when I was describing them, that the tests were going to run for a month, and most of them actually ran for 2 months. I just keep letting it go because I felt like the longer the better. So pretty much all tests were 2 months. The only exception was the one with the meter inside the box with the cigars. That one was for 45 days. But everything else was 2 months, except for one more, the test that failed, where it was just air. The humidity went from 94 down to 60, which is just proof that these bags are not water vapor proof. They are oxygen, but not water vapor. That test truly shows that they're not. Some people have said that the way I do the test is an accurate method. However, that is flat out wrong. So I think that became one of the most important tests that shows that there's a difference between oxygen and water vapor, and that is why you need a tight seal and why you don't need a Bovita bag at the same time. So anyways, thought I'd add that to the end of my video. This is an example of a box that has been vacuum sealed now for quite some time. I chose this box for a few reasons. One, I'm going to open and smoke this immediately. Now the box is obviously VR, but what's inside is some ACM double Coronas dated May 15th. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is because often what happens is you get a cab, 50 wonderful double Coronas, box date May 2015. Problem with this is, unless you plan to go through all 50 of them quickly, you are best off splitting the box. So what I did was, when I opened this last year, I took out 25, transferred from this box, and then resealed them. So depending on your view of what happens in time, these cigars should taste pretty similar, have the same flavor intensity as the box that I had for the other 25. So the other thing worth noting, and not always recommended, I don't know how well this is seen, but here on the lip here, cigar box, it's indented a little bit. Now, having done this enough times, I can tell you that is not a big deal. But this top of this box is pressed down, giving an impression that the cigars may have been squished a little bit. I can tell you, based off experience, that this little of an indent, they're just fine. But we're going to open up this box right now, and I will show you the contents and what they look like. Also worth noting before I cut into this is, obviously, if you want to make this look nicer, you can tape up the corners. So everywhere I have it all taped up, so it looks clean. When it goes into the humidor, you get the visual nicety of the box. If you just vacuum seal it with all the flaps, it just looks terrible. So personal preference, it makes no difference. As I have this opened up, you can see that there's actually two seams here. I've kind of done that more recently. The most likely break you're going to get is a bad seal. So on both ends, I tend to do a double seal. Since doing that, I don't have any breakage of seals. So again, personal preference, but just something I recommend. Okay, as we open this, often you'll hear the sound of oxygen and the air flowing into it. Let's see how well this is picked up. Not really. But usually, when you're under good seal, the oxygen will flow in. You'll hear as if it's almost coming back to life. With the plastic off, you can see that the box now and the outside now are completely flush. So there was no permanent damage to the box and likely the contents within. As again, it's a preference how far you want to take the vacuum seal. I kind of know where it can be, where I'm not going to have a problem, but that just takes years of experience of doing this. I kind of made a mistake here. I just kind of ripped through the bag and tore it. I'm really looking forward to having this cigar. I'm actually shooting this portion of the video on July 4th, in case you hear fireworks in the background. If you cut it more evenly down, you can actually reuse the bag. I've had no problems with reusing the bag. So in my rush, this bag is now useless. So I will not be reusing that one, obviously, but just know that you can if you choose. All right, with that, let's open this up. First thing I always do is the smell. Oh my gosh. It's with the cigars just sitting in that seal and that smell, that's just been trapped in there. The cigar has been stewing in it. So anyhow, here are the cigars. Now, obviously, this is a used box, so I toss them in there. There's no cedar between them and that white box. I just put this in an empty box, and that's why it's looking like this. But the point of this more is, what do the cigars look like? What do they smell like after they've been sealed? Now, this box has been sealed, except for briefly when I exchanged boxes so I bought it in 2017, and this is currently 2024, so this box is 7 years. So you can see the cigars are perfect. There is no crushing whatsoever. Now, I guess a little bit in favor of this one is I had a little bit of play here. Instead of the traditional 13, there's only 12 on top here. How they were able to cram cigars in 13, there's not enough room for a 13th cigar. So Again, this came from a cab, so that might be the issue of transferring between a cab and a standard dress box. But anyhow, I see no issue whatsoever. Let's take a few off. Let's check the bottom row. Yeah, and I'm seeing nothing but perfection. So here's the other thing. As I've previously talked about, mold. There is not a speck of mold anywhere. Kind of points, look at the foot, but one random example. No magical plume, mold, whatever you want to call it. But the cigars are in perfect shape. And they smell delightful. So, as I mentioned before, also is, can you smoke the cigar immediately? I am going to smoke the cigar right now. I will report back on the tasting notes of what the Monterey Double Corona, 9 years of age, 7 years in a vacuum seal, tastes like. That is what the purpose of this vacuum seal. As I said, I'm working on longer term. Most of my boxes, 2015 is pretty much the oldest. As I said, buying cigars primarily from 2017 on, at least the largest collection when I started vacuum sealing. So that's how far I'm back. And so each year I keep reporting back on how the vacuum seals go. So anyhow, more as soon as I finish this wonderful cigar on the 4th of July.
All right, some flavor notes as I smoke the cigar, and the background you hear fireworks. Apologize for that. I said this is the 4th. So this cigar is extremely smooth and full flavored, suggesting, of course, that the smoothing effect of the aging has commenced, but none of the flavor has dissipated. Problem with aging cigars, to get that smooth note, is that you will see a softening of the flavors. That is not the case here. It is a quite full flavored cigar. I'm getting a marshmallow, cream, coffee, almond. I get a hint of chocolate, and cinnamon. It kind of is giving me a hot chocolate vibe. You know, the hot chocolate with some cream on top, top it with some cinnamon. That's basically what I'm getting from this. And the flavors as I'm smoking this is just getting more and more intense. Again, this is a 9-year-old cigar, 2 years natural age, and 7 years of vacuum sealing. So, huge bonus that this cigar is just smoking as great as this. The construction is absolutely perfection. And yeah, I'm really digging the cigar, so I'm just going to get back to it because the cigar is so great. But yeah, no ill effects whatsoever. Vacuum sealing. I mean, this is a surprise. You know, almost every cigar I smoke at this point has now been in a vacuum seal, so this is no surprise. But I said maybe the one surprise that a few people who've done this noted that, you know, a cigar could go through a sick period. This was cut open an hour ago and not needing to sit for 3 to 6 months, as I've seen reported from some people, which doesn't make any sense. But it's absolute perfection. So happy camper. Sorry, I forgot one other note that's important here. Due to the softening and the smoothing of the strength, the nicotine, this cigar is much more friendly to retrohaling. I find myself actually retrohaling more than I normally do, as if my body can sense how smooth it is and just wants to retrohale. And, you know, the more you can retrohale and get that flavor through your nose, the flavors are just amped up. So, you know, as an extra bonus of this, you know, this whole process of vacuum sealing is that ability to retrohale significantly more without burning your nose from any strong ammonia-ish flavors that you get in a younger cigar. So, additional bonus of these flavors is due to the retrohaling effect. So, add another check column for the vacuum sealing process. Getting a little harder to focus here as the night moves on and the fireworks take off. Thought I'd time this. probably can't hear in the background. There's a fire truck going by, and you just gotta love people and fireworks. Anyhow, I'm sure we'll be hearing fire trucks for most of the night. The cigar just progressed and just get better and better. It is just ultimately smooth. It kind of, the coffee note and almond dropped off and just became much more flavored around just the core hot chocolate, marshmallow cream, and cinnamon. It's been the predominant flavors in this last bit. The cigar is about an hour and 40-ish minutes in. Probably will last me another 20-ish minutes, so I'll get a little over 2 hours smoke time on this. Anyways, that'll be the last of the note of this cigar. Just a fabulous experience and just proof that vacuum sealing just makes cigars better. Why people don't vacuum every box of cigars is beyond me. It's obviously a lack of understanding. But once you start doing it and finding the ability to age a cigar while keeping the flavor, strong flavor notes, and losing the strength and nicotine, ammonia flavors, and just enjoying the flavors is just an unreal experience. And I really, really recommend that everyone give it a try. It doesn't hurt you to do a single box and let it sit. Obviously, more of a benefit for people like us who are going to Cuba buying boxes. You know, a box like this, when I was going to Cuba, a cab would run like $570 for 50 of these. Obviously, it's nothing you can really do at the moment. But anyhow, that is my video on vacuum sealing. I hope you guys enjoy it. And good luck. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.